Chapter 4 of The String of Pearls. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Catherine Eastman. The String of Pearls. Author unknown. Chapter 4. Hark! 12 o'clock at midday is cheerily proclaimed by St. Dunstan's Church, and scarcely have the sounds done echoing throughout the neighborhood, and scarcely has the clock of Lincoln's Inn done chiming in with its announcement of the same hour, when Bellyard, Temple Bar, becomes a scene of commotion. What a scampering of feet is there! What a laughing and talking! What a jostling to be first! And what an immense number of maneuvers are resorted to by some of the throng to distance others. And mostly from Lincoln's Inn do these persons, young and old, but most certainly a majority of the former, come bustling and striving, although from the neighboring legal establishments, likewise, there come not a few. The Temple contributes its numbers, and from the more distant Gray's Inn there come a goodly lot. Now Bellyard is almost choked up, and a stranger would wonder what could be the matter, and most probably stand in some doorway until the commotion was over. Is it a fire? Is it a fight? Or anything else sufficiently alarming and extraordinary to excite the junior members of the legal profession to such a species of madness? No, it is none of these. Nor is there a fat cause to be run for, which, in the hands of some clever practitioner, might become quite a vested interest. No, the enjoyment is purely one of a physical character, and all the pacing and racing, all this turmoil and trouble, all this pushing, jostling, laughing, and shouting, is to see who will get first to Lovett's pie shop. Yes, on the left-hand side of Bellyard, going down from Carey Street, was, at the time we write of, one of the most celebrated shops for the sale of veal and pork pies that London ever produced. High and low, rich and poor, resorted to it. Its fame had spread far and wide, and it was because the first batch of those pies came up at 12 o'clock that there was such a rush of the legal profession to obtain them. Their fame had spread even to great distances, and many persons carried them to the suburbs of the city as quite a treat to friends and relations there residing. And well did they deserve their reputation, those delicious pies. There was about them a flavor never surpassed and rarely equaled. The paste was of the most delicate construction, and impregnated with the aroma of a delicious gravy that defies description. Then the small portions of meat which they contained were so tender, and the fat and the lean so artistically mixed up, that to eat one of Lovett's pies was such a provocative to eat another, that many persons who came to lunch stayed to dine, wasting more than an hour, perhaps, of precious time, and endangering, who knows to the contrary, the success of some lawsuit thereby. The counter in Lovett's pie shop was in the shape of a horseshoe, and it was the custom of the young bloods from the Temple and Lincoln's Inn to sit in a row upon its edge while they partook of the delicious pies and chatted gaily about one concern and another. Many an appointment was made at Lovett's pie shop, and many a piece of gossiping scandal was there first circulated. The din of tongues was prodigious. The ringing laugh of the boy who looked upon the quarter of an hour he spent at Lovett's as the brightest of the whole 24 mingled gaily with the more boisterous mirth of his seniors, and oh, with what rapidity the pies disappeared! They were brought up on large trays, each of which contained about 100, and from these trays they were so speedily transferred to the mouths of Mrs. Lovett's customers that it looked like a work of magic. and now we have let out some portion of the secret. There was a Mistress Lovett. But possibly our readers guessed as much, for what but a female hand, and that female buxom, young and good-looking, could have ventured upon the production of those pies? Yes, Mrs. Lovett was all that, and every enamored young scion of the law, as he devoured his pie, pleased himself with the idea that the charming Mrs. Lovett had made that pie especially for him, and that fate or predestination had placed it in his hands. And it was astonishing to see with what impartiality and with tact the fair pastry cook bestowed her smiles upon her admirers, so that none could say he was neglected, while it was extremely difficult for anyone to say he was preferred. This was pleasant, but at the same time it was provoking, to all except Mrs. Lovett, in whose favor it got up a sort of excitement that paid extraordinarily well, because some of the young fellows thought, and thought it with wisdom too, that he who consumed the most pies would be in the most likely way to receive the greatest number of smiles from the lady. Acting upon this supposition, some of her more enthusiastic admirers went on consuming the pies until they were almost ready to burst. But there were others, again, of a more philosophic turn of mind, who went for the pies only, and did not care one jot for Mrs. Lovett. These declared that her smile was cold and uncomfortable, that it was upon her lips, but had no place in her heart, that it was the set smile of a ballet dancer, which is about one of the most unmirthful things in existence. Then there were some who went even beyond this, and, while they admitted the excellence of the pies, and went every day to partake of them, swore that Mrs. Lovett had quite a sinister aspect, and that they could see what a merely superficial affair her blandishments were, and that there was a lurking devil in her eye, that, if once roused, would be capable of achieving some serious things, and might not be so easily quelled again. By 12:05, Mrs. Lovett's counter was full, and the savory steam of the hot pies went out in fragrant clouds into Belliard, being sniffed up by many a poor wretch passing by, who lacked the means of making one in the throng that were devouring the dainty morsels within. "Why, Tobias Rigg," said a young man with his mouth full of pie, "where have you been since you left Mr. Snow's and paper buildings? I've not seen you for some days." "No," said Tobias, "I've gone into another line. Instead of being a lawyer and helping to shave the clients, I'm going to shave the lawyers now. A twopenny book, if you please, Mrs. Lovett. He would be an emperor if he couldn't get pies like these. Mr. Clift." "Well, they are good. Of course we know that, Tobias. But do you mean to say you're going to be a barber?" "Yes, I am with Sweeney Todd, the barber of Fleet Street, close to St. Dunstan's." "The deuce you are! Well, I'm going to a party tonight, and I'll drop in and get dressed and shaved and patronize your master." Tobias put his mouth close to the ear of the young lawyer, and in a fearful sort of whisper said the one word, "Don't." "Don't? What for?" Tobias made no answer, and throwing down his twopence, scampered out of the shop as fast as he could. He had only been sent a message by Sweeney Todd in the neighborhood, but as he heard the clock strike 12, and 2 penny pieces were lying at the bottom of his pocket, it was not in human nature to resist running into Lovett's and converting them into a pork pie. "What an odd thing," thought the young lawyer. "I'll just drop in at Sweeney Todd's now on purpose and ask Tobias what he means. I quite forgot, too, while he was here, to ask him what all that riot was about a dog at Todd's door." "A veal," said a young man rushing in. "A 2-penny veal, Mrs. Lovett." When he got it, he consumed it with voracity, and then, noticing an acquaintance in the shop, he whispered to him, "I can't stand it any more. I have cut the spectacle maker. Joanna is faithless, and I know not what